Do you ever wonder what it would be like to shrink yourself down and explore the world in miniature? You'd need a guarantee that spiders wouldn't cart you off behind the skirting boards, but imagine what it would be like to see a bedroom from the perspective of an insect.
It is fucking minging.
Or to go spelunking down the back of the sofa in search of that long-lost tenor. I think everyone wants to see the world from new perspectives. Whether we're sticking cameras inside violins or assembling miniatures in the garden shed, it's nice to think that the objects we surround ourselves with can take on new life if we just look at them from the right angle. I think this is why stories about miniature people doing miniature things have always been a background hum in popular culture. Gulliver's Travels, Borrowers, Toy Story, that one episode of The Simpsons, tales about shrink rays and tiny civilizations scratch a primal itch in all our brains, offering new perspectives on everything from our bread bins to our arteries. Video games, though, take it a step further. They give us the freedom to navigate these microscopic worlds ourselves and poke at their edges, even if it is usually with a handgun, a square jaw, and Troy Baker's voice. Personally, I've always had a soft spot for Toy Story 2 on the PS1, which allows you to toodle around the gardens and gutters of suburbia with a surprising amount of interactivity, like bouncing on palm fronds or turning on taps to flood the neighbour's bathroom. It's the best Buzz Lightyear-based sociopathy simulator in all of gaming. Of course, Toy Story 2 is old hat at this point. I imagine all 6 of its pixels are probably crowding out your TV, so in recent years we've also had the likes of Grounded and Superland, games that render miniature worlds with increasingly impressive detail, for both better and worse. From Chibi Robo to the Minish Cap and even Deadly Creatures, a game which feels increasingly like I imagined it with every year that passes. There's a rich tradition of mini-worlds in video games, and last month it got much richer.
We need jungle, I'm afraid.
Derek Yu and a cadre of weirdo indie devs recently released UFO 50, an incredible 50-in-1 game collection that spans every genre from tower defense to point and click to whatever this is. One of the standout games from this collection, though, is Mini and Max, and that's because of how well it delivers on the promise of miniature worlds. I'm not lying when I say that Mini and Max might be one of the best games released this year. Over a terse 6 hours, it explores the idea of miniature in ways I've never seen before in video games. I am going to spoil some of the game's surprises in this video, it's hard to talk about otherwise, but if you can't watch any further, just know that Mini and Max is a microscopic story like no other. Mini and Max follows Minnie, a bolshy young girl, and Max, her talking dog, who've been locked inside a closet, R. Kelly style, by Minnie's malevolent sister. Luckily, with equal mixtures magic and can-do attitude, they've figured out how to shrink themselves to the size of insects, and they set about using their newfound power to escape. Like a lot of the games in UFO 50, Mini and Max initially appears very simple. As Minnie, your interaction with the world is limited to Mario 2-style pick-up and throw mechanics, beaning tiny people with balls of lint and dirt, or building rudimentary staircases so you can access high places. In terms of how the game feels in your thumbs, it doesn't exactly have the polish of Mario 2. Don't get me wrong, it's a proper game, like you would find on the shelves of your local neighbourhood eShop, but there isn't a lot of personality to the movement in and of itself. It's a mildly floaty, meat and potatoes, left, right, up, down kind of affair. It doesn't take long to realise, though, that Mini and Max isn't your standard side-scrolling platformer. If you head all the way to the right, the side-scrolling aficionado's secret strategy, all you'll find is questions. You'll learn that Minnie's house cat has also shrunk themselves down, and from their throne in the doorknob up high, they're ruling the closet with an iron fist, preventing anyone from leaving. How you get to them, though, is anyone's guess. From this point onwards, Minnie's closet becomes a wide open sandbox, in which the player has to intuit their own path forward. If my time on Earth has taught me anything, it's that when dealing with cats, nothing is straightforward. And so this is actually a puzzle game wearing Mario 2's clothes, one that deeply rewards exploration into the smallest nooks and crannies of this unassuming cupboard. What I really like about Mini and Max is that it isn't just a story told from a miniature perspective, but it actually allows you to shrink and grow at will. Games like Grounded and Toy Story 2 are amazing at portraying the visual fantasy of being tiny, but at the same time, the shrinking has already happened. Set aside the visual appeal of being small, and both of these games are just jumpy, crafty, video game-ass video games. Mini and Max, though, adopts the process of shrinking and growing as a core mechanic. At any point, you can scale up or down. So when Mini is large, the closet almost acts like a world map. The room is segregated into themed chunks. You've got a bookcase, flower pots, a shelf, a couple of power outlets, and an expanse of carpet connecting it all together. Think too hard about it, and it's actually an interior designer's worst nightmare.
The only thing I can say about this one is just like, oof. Oof.
But regardless, Mini's larger size allows you to quickly travel to any part of the closet effortlessly. When Mini is small though, there's a lot more to see and do. From the ground level, Mini's closet is alive with goofy characters you can observe and interact with. There are board games come to life, complete with rampaging game pieces, tribes of insects go into war, and even a few other shrunken humans dotted around the place. Much like in Toy Story 2, the miniature world is portrayed as a chaotic and bustling playground, with hundreds of small creatures all wrestling to inhabit the same space, and every loose nail and penny acts as a signpost towards your next discovery. Mini and Max is full of surprises, where you'll shrink down on top of an otherwise inconspicuous object and find a whole new world within. One of the earliest and most significant surprises is that there's actually an additional tier of shrinking, down to the size of bacteria. So altogether, you've got regular-sized Mini, who can navigate the closet with ease, doll-sized Mini, the toy store terror yeeting heavy objects at bugs and rodents, and then microscopic Mini, who dodges malevolent microbes in forests of hair follicles. Once I discovered this additional layer of shrinking, what started as a novel puzzle platformer quickly became one of my favourite games of the year. At the microscopic level, Mini and Max's world is gigantic, and brimming with creative world building. One of my initial experiments was to shrink down on an elderly woman's head, revealing, amongst all the 8-bit strands of hair, a single flea. It's a small detail and kind of a dumb joke, but the game is full of these little touches, and they add up to something really special. Correct me if I'm wrong, but these kinds of microscopic worlds aren't that common in media. We've had centuries to play with the idea of tiny people, from Faye to sprites to an overly smug rodent called Stuart. But the idea of something so small that it could set up a coffee shop in your eyebrows is a bit more rare, and usually resolved for more medical things like Osmosis Jones or Fantastic Voyage, stories about rocketing through people's bloodstreams in spaceships. Step outside of the human body though, and the carpet fibres and mould swamps of Mini and Max are a lot more novel. I'm vaguely aware that microtribes of gelatinous organisms crawl across my house on a daily basis, but to see them dramatised like this, slithering and sliding around plug sockets and shelves, is both amazing and terrifying. And Mini and Max does a pretty good job of connecting the gameplay between all of its different sizes. Objects you hold scale up and down with you, and so a lot of the game's puzzles are logistical problems, figuring out how to transport items to the deepest reaches of the closet at the correct size. Kinda like Ice Road Truckers, if it didn't have any trucks and was about transfiguring your body to navigate mountains of Jaffa Cake crumbs. I'll be honest, I haven't seen Ice Road Truckers. Regardless, it all leads to some very practical platforming puzzles, like stealing pill bugs so you can play Alex Honnold up the bedroom walls, But the larger structure almost mimics a point-and-click adventure, where your long-term goals revolve around using Object X in place Y. It doesn't get too crazy. You're not creating any cat hair moustaches or solving puzzles with literal puns. But the interplay between different sizes and origins of objects asks you to explore this miniature world to its limits. And like a lot of point-and-click games, it's also surprisingly reactive. While exploring, I stumbled across a bacterial chef who wanted some pink goo for a recipe, the old McDonald's special. And what amazed me was how they acknowledged when I brought them different pink objects. This unassuming microbial Pierre White, living alone on the smallest part of a shelf, had enough scripting to account for all the different pink objects you could bring him. I'd love to see just how many scripted interactions like this are buried in this game, because it seems reactive to your input in ways that you wouldn't necessarily expect. And that extends to the basic mechanics. For example, you can shrink all the way down and pick up the tiniest particle of gunk, scale it up, stand on top of it, and shrink back down to discover a recursive microworld within a microworld. You can push against this system and it'll push back in surprisingly logical ways. It's obvious that a lot of the microscopic world has been procedurally generated. I mean, how could it not be? Even a space as limited as a closet outscales the largest open worlds when you get small enough. But there are a lot of unique scenes and characters out there if you're willing to comb through the dust. There are whole towns buried in the deepest fibres of the carpet, inhabited by weirdo cultures who worship the ceiling light and trade on the backs of flies. And all of these microworlds mimic the natural properties of the material they're on top of. Shrinking down on mold reveals puddles of toxic goo. Shrinking down on sanitized steel gives you an endlessly smooth, pest-free expanse. The microworld isn't just algorithmic soup, but it maps correctly and consistently onto its larger equivalent, right down to the colour and texture of the background. The effort that's gone into making this world cohesive across all three of its size layers is astonishing, especially when you remember that this is just one of 50 games released concurrently. Mini and Max doesn't outstay its welcome. As the game goes on, you upgrade Mini with an array of power-ups that make navigating the closet a cinch. It becomes a pure sandbox, allowing you to take in the sights and sounds of the closet without getting bogged down with backtracking or enemy encounters. Superland actually did a similar thing, and when you've got these expansive miniature worlds, it seems like the smart approach. People don't fantasize about shrinking down so they can simulate the office commute across their kitchen lino. They want to see weird little dudes make questionable food with pink goo. And there's a lot of quality of life in this game that facilitates that. At the beginning of this video, I said that the appeal of miniature worlds is the new perspectives that they offer. And Mini and Max is incredible because it offers multiple perspectives on every part of its world. Shrink down on something, shrink down on it again, pick it up, scale it up, trade it for knowledge, use it to fight, use it to explore. Every object exists within a larger context that you can drill down into at will. It's interesting to play a game that engages so thoroughly with the idea of size and the different perspectives that come with it. Ultimately, I think Mini and Max might have usurped Toy Story 2 as my favourite game told in miniature. Maybe it was when I discovered the dust bunnies who sell you high explosives, or perhaps just when I first went microbial and realised what this game was actually doing. It rewards curiosity, both in its scripted world building, but also in its more procedural aspects, believably filling out a microscopic world with colours and textures that map onto a larger whole. You can walk across this carpet in 5 seconds, 5 minutes, or an hour, and even though it's a wildly different perspective each time, they all link together believably. I'm enamoured with UFO 50, and Mini and Max is a big part of that. This is a game of enormous scale and ambition, fittingly presented in a tiny package. If, like me, you ever wondered what it would be like to shrink yourself down and talk about Breaking Bad with the ants in your kitchen, you owe it to yourself to check out this game. And hell, then you might as well check out the other 49 while you're at it.